when we start our careers, most of us have just graduated probably from university or art college or something like that. And, up until that time, our entire education has been planned for us. Many people have told us what we should be doing, the exams we should take, the qualifications we need. Then we get into our first job and we start learning our skills proper and on the job. And then there comes a point where you start taking more responsibility and you start to get to a kind of sense of, mastery of your tools, or at least real confidence in your ability to do it, whatever it is you're doing. Now, I know mostly creative people and the design discipline. That's what I've been involved in the last 30 years. But the more I speak to people like engineers, people from medicine, other careers, I know this is a pattern that follows for many, many different careers where people kind of make things or do something for a living. And then at some point you get good enough at it that people will start saying, well, you should manage other people doing it. So the first stage is probably managing a project, running a project or leading a project. And then at some point you might lead a team, and that might be a temporary team that comes together to do something. Or you might gradually create a department or be responsible for a whole function in an organization. And then you're starting to take that move into leadership as well as management. One of the things that I encountered personally, and one of the things that comes up all the time in my design leadership coaching, is this idea that you kind of go through a dip at that point in time. And that dip is because you start to let go of the tools and being on the tools and that kind of craft and whatever form it might take. And you start realizing that, actually, a lot of my job is really conversations. So I would say 80 or 90% of my job as a design director was really about managing and leading conversations. It was kind of never really design team saying, hey, Andy, we're stuck designing this. Can you help us with the design? Occasionally there was some stuff like that, but very little. Mostly it was like this stakeholder's being really difficult. The client is being really difficult. This person on our team is not functioning well. And it was really trying to resolve that stuff. And when I realized this, I realized that I was a beginner at all of this. And yet at the same time, I was sort of giving up my skills on the tools. And I felt like I went through this kind of dip in the middle. And I had a real crisis of confidence here. I used to have it as one dip in this diagram. And actually, I realized that sort of what happens is you start off as a young gun, you think you know everything. And then a bit of maturity comes in, you realize all the stuff you don't know. And you start to really build up those skills, and you become a senior individual contributor. And you may go on to be, a principal or something like that in design. That's a role where generally you're not managing people, you're really responsible for a certain aspect of the craft. But even then, and certainly if you're going into a sort of management and leadership role, you're kind of a beginner leader. And this dip often happens at exactly the time where you are meant to be at the top of your game. And, supposed to know everything. That's why you've been promoted. And you feel like a massive imposter, and you feel like you don't know what you're doing. And it can really be an existential crisis because you give up one identity of being a designer or a creator or whatever it is you were doing on your tools, could be a programmer, and you're taking on this other one that you actually aren't that good at yet. And so that's mostly what I'm doing in my design leadership coaching is helping people through that process. Now, for a lot of people, that also comes at a midlife. So a lot of people between sort of mid-30s to late 40s, and certainly in that sort of period of the 40s, it's kind of a midlife crisis at the same time as a mid-career crisis, where you're there thinking, I've got to where I wanted to be all those years ago, and now I'm here. Well, I'm not really sure if it's all that. Is this really what I want to be doing? Is this what my life is about? I don't know. And partly it's because of that unwinding of one identity and the recreating of the other that you're not quite so sure about. And partly it's generally because those questions come up in life. What I wanted to do with this channel is I'm writing a book about navigating this creative leadership dip. And I've been talking to lots of people. I've had lots of coachees that I've drawn upon, plus my own experience over many, many years. And I know that lots of people, they don't have the budget for coaching. And certainly sort of early career leaders, you might be a lead or even senior and being responsible for some stuff. You're not often in the sort of corporate world in that leadership role where you might actually get given some budget for it. And so I wanted to do with the channel is offer up a lot of the tips, the advice, the experiences, sometimes just thoughts around navigating this design leadership dip, and put them out for everyone to experience. I would love to hear, whether those things resonate with you, whether you think I'm talking complete rubbish. I'm very, very aware that I'm a white, middle-aged, middle-class male, and that my experiences are from a certain position of privilege. So I'm really interested in hearing other people's experiences around that. Fortunately, my coaching roster is much more diverse than I am, and I've made an effort to make sure that the people I'm talking to as part of the book's research are much more diverse than I am. So let me know anything like that in the comments. On the channel, I'm also going to be putting up my Power of 10 podcast. All the audio podcasts are now up there. I'm increasingly doing the interviews as either live streams or recordings and with video, so they'll be up there on the channel too. That's with a wide range of people. It's Power of 10 is really about looking at design from different levels of zoom. It's named after the famous Ray and Charles Eames film, which looks at the relative size of things in the universe. And I'm looking for design around from small, thoughtful detail all the way through to organizational change and onto transformations in society and the world. So that can be anyone talking about a specific thing, about a particular discipline, right the way through to people talking about sustainability and the future of capitalism. Along the way, I might add in a few other things. So there's a few tools I use. One of them is Obsidian, which I use for using my notes. And there's a lot you can do with that to help make some space, make some time. I think one of the fundamental aspects of design leadership is really making sure you've actually got a kind of clear head and doing the work on yourself. And you need space for that. You can't do that kind of inner work if you're just constantly got this flood of Slack messages and emails and other stuff. So I'll look at some tools that might be to help with that and some techniques. And I'm going to liberally steal from a lot of other people. I'll make sure that I mention them if I can. And I remember, if you think I've stolen something and haven't credited someone, well, let me know in the comments. I'm sure you will. And lastly, one of the things I do as an outlet, as a sideline, is I'm a games master. I'm a dungeon master, actually, for a tabletop role-playing game called Dungeons and Dragons. Most people know it as this kind of nerdy pursuit. And it was sort of made famous more recently by its appearance in Stranger Things. But there's a whole lot of things there about the crossover between facilitating a group of people playing that game and that sort of collaborative storytelling and where that might go, and setting up safe spaces and watching out for the dynamics, which are also really applicable to design leadership. And there's a few things I've learned from doing that I'm going to kind of bring back into here too. And I think in that, one of the things that I really learned and really unlocked for me as a sort of little final tip is thinking about design leadership as slow motion facilitation. So, we think, I think a lot of designers have done some kind of facilitation of workshops of some kind, whether they're small or large. And one of the things you do in that is you really think about, who is in the space, who's invited, who's not invited. We do quite a lot of activities that are structured in a way to flatten hierarchy, for example, whether those are things like round robin, where you're kind of passing ideas around and critiquing them. There's all sorts of things like that. We also take a lot of care around the cadence. Are we in a divergent space here? Do we need to sort of shake things up? Or do we need to kind of not shut things down, but converge and focus and prioritize? And you look to see whether people are engaged or disengaged. You look to see what the kind of energy is. But you also, most of all, think about what's the intent of what we're doing here? What are the best ways for us to approach this, the best activities to do? What are the outcomes we want? And what might be some of the outputs? I think it's a very useful structure to think about it. And the nice thing is, if you're a designer at least, or someone who's done facilitation, is that those are tools you already have already, right? And you know how to do that. And actually, a lot of the leadership stuff, if you look at the kind of HBR, kind of business leadership of how to lead things, a lot of that's kind of deprogramming people from a very sort of corporate command and control way of thinking around leadership, and actually about understanding people and people dynamics. So that'll all be here on the channel. I'm really looking forward to hearing your responses, seeing what comes up and how this unfolds. And if you want, you can go to Polane.com. You'll find all the links that you can possibly want, lots of different ways to get hold of me and get in touch with me. And you'll also find the subscription to my newsletter. It's very occasional, called Doctor's Note. And obviously things like my blog and Power of 10. I'm really looking forward to hearing from you.